features a system that projects the internet signal in literally any environment, whether inside your moving car, at campsites, construction sites, or simply at home to connect your family's smartphones and smart TVs. And the best part, with Ultralink, you'll never have to worry about expensive monthly fees and contracts again.
In this video, we will explore Rakai, Kuchi, Uganda's cannibal kingdom. Our adventure starts in Uganda's capital, Kampala. The trip to Rakai will take 4 to 6 hours, and to maximize safety and flexibility, we have rented a car for around 130,000 Ugandan shillings per day. The first order of business is to fill up on gas. I think 100,000 shillings worth should be enough to get us to our destination.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
When we told people we are going to Rakai, their first reaction was fear. All over Uganda, this town is known for cannibalism and voodoo. The cannibals are said to target outsiders who don't know the area well. That means people like us.
So, I just got off the phone with my mom, and when I told her we are going to Rakai, she just told me, my son, just make sure I don't get eaten. Make sure I come back alive. Yeah, so I told her there's nothing to do. I'll make sure I don't get eaten. And, well, she says she's praying for me, so we hope we come back alive. This is where you know that you can manage.
The traffic on the road is intense. Despite it being around 8 p.m. at night, it takes us around an hour to even leave the city. But eventually we make it to the open road. This is the Kampala-Masaka Expressway, one of Uganda's fastest and most important highways. How much should I give him? 20 is too much. Just for his money? But he was going here anyway. People are broke here. It's not Kampala. Okay, so Rakai is known for cannibalism. How did this start?
But from me, I don't know when it started. But I hear some stories saying that there is what we call injala.
So,
Too much hunger, which affected these people of Rakai. And I think it's where cannibalism started. Injala called
Starvation.
yeah, so it says like in the olden days, before, there was this kind of hunger that came and struck this area.
Yeah.
So during that time, there was no food, and people started turning on each other.
And people started feeding on each other, and from time then up to now, because those are the stories that are told to them. Because as for him, he said he was just born and he's found this cannibalism there, but those are the kind of stories they tell them.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, is there still hunger in Rakai?
like at this time.
Yeah.
At this time it is not hunger. But for me, I think this cannibalism, I think they feed on others over as their habit, or as kugambanga obanga muzimu, because oli tayinza kati nga gwe singa nga bwempulira toyinza bbanga tolya bantu.
Yeah, so he says he also doesn't know, because right now there is no hunger. People now do agriculture, there is food. But he also wonders
They
why
get the taste of it.
it's still going on. But an explanation that he could give is maybe it has become a habit. And over time, it has evolved with witchcraft and all the voodoo. Because, of course, even he himself doesn't believe if you eat a fellow human being, you can never be a normal human being. And he also believes that when someone eats a human being and makes you eat them, you will never remain the same. You will either also have to turn into cannibalism, and you also become a cannibal. You start eating, feeding on other people. So he was trying to explain a scenario when one time they were coming from Chotera. They had gone to attend, it was a festival for one of those musicians who came. So as they were coming back, riding in the night, a cannibal or a wizard just crossed the road. And at that moment, when that person crossed, the motorcycles, the lights went off, and all the tires couldn't move. It was like there was some supernatural force that was holding back this. So after this person disappeared into the bushes, that's when everything returned to normal. Yes, that's what I was trying to explain. Yeah.
Now, how common is cannibalism here?
I don't know. Kugamba tukiwulira kugamba in our nearest villages, as you see in Chibale, Chachirugu, and they say, those towns nearby Chiziba, bali abantu ng'agwa ebintu azirika nga temubitegeera bulungi.
Yeah, so he's saying here in town it's not as common as you would think, but in the neighboring villages it's common. You'll always hear cases, and it's well known. Everyone knows that cannibalism takes place
So
in the
all
neighboring
this to
villages.
scare you.
It's there. It is something that is known to everyone. Everyone knows that it happened. So how common is it? Yes, that's a daily thing you have to know that people eat. But because you're in town and they're in the village, you can't know how many people have been eaten today or yesterday or tomorrow, how many will be eaten. But it's a practice that takes place. It's not as common as you would think. But in the neighboring villages, it's common. You'll always hear cases, and it's well known. Everyone knows that cannibalism takes place. In the neighboring villages, deep, it's there. It is something that is known to everyone. Everyone knows that it happened. So how common is it? Yes, that's a daily thing you have to know that people eat. But because you're in town and they're in the village, you can't know how many people have been eaten today or yesterday or tomorrow, how many will be eaten. But it's a practice that takes place. Yeah, so, and he says even in schools, some of the schools here, the local schools, it also takes place, whereby some pupils or students come from families that practice cannibalism. So sometimes they will give their children the human meat or human soup to go and feed it to their fellow students who don't do that, so that they can also turn and start doing that. And when they feed it to their fellow students, of course it comes with that effect, spiritual attacks, demonic manifestations and all that. And sometimes even in school, they will give some of these families that are cannibalistic will give certain medicines to their children to go and put it on other their fellow students, so that they can also either turn into or start being possessed by all these demonic things related to cannibalism. So sometimes they will cut their bodies. There's that practice. It is common here in Uganda, whereby they cut you. They get like a razor, and then they cut you. It's called emisari. They cut you, and then they put some medicine on your body. Yes. So through the cuts, the medicine is absorbed in the body. And when that medicine is absorbed, so you'd wake up and find your body cut. And from there on, you will see this victim starting to behave weirdly. That's when you even start having the interest. You start waking up at night. It's like sleepwalking. You move. You start behaving like wizards, move naked and all that. Yeah. And he says he has heard of this too. And he has also one time ever seen it. Of course, when a scenario happens somewhere, people go there to see. Yes.
So, where did these cannibals get human meat from?
Oh dear.
Human meat. Ebiseera ebisinga, as you see those burial
Where
ceremonies,
can they get it from? The shop?
omugenzi okuziika naye gundi yafudde eggulo, kitegeera kati bwe bagenda okuziika after that burial ekiro nowulira nti baze bamututte lumodde ng'ekyali bulungi nga bwe yabadde naye nga bagamba omuntu bamulidde wekirabo.
So how do they get the meat or the bodies? That's what I also thought mostly. Yeah. Now it says usually they get the thing mostly from during like burial ceremonies when they are going to bury someone. Remember, a lot of people will come and converge at the burial to it's like paying their last respects and all that. But usually what happens after that is the process of how these people get that meat. So people come and bury. Then later on, when people leave, that's when the wizards or the cannibals come to get their fair share of the body. But usually how they do it, sometimes when people are there, they will always cause some kind of catastrophe. Like maybe a lot of wind blowing with a lot of dust, a lot of rain, you know. And then when that comes, people are forced to run away. And when people run away, for them, they come in. But how do they come in? Sometimes you won't see them physically. They can come in disguises of like dogs. You can see like a dog coming, or a cat, because it is believed that they can turn into anything since they possess their demonic powers and all that. So they can come. Yeah, yes. So they can even cause just darkness from nowhere. Like at this time, darkness just comes and overtakes all this place. And during that darkness, they do their thing. So usually, they use their magical powers. They will never break the grave, and you find that they have dug it out. But the body will be out. Using their powers, they will pull out the body. Sometimes you will see the coffin just disappearing. Imagine this is a coffin you've buried underground, and you just see it disappear from nowhere. You see it going, and it disappears. Or sometimes they say they have some special sticks, small sticks, that they will come and use. They just come and tap them on the grave, speak some words, and then the body will just disappear, and that's how they take it to their destination where maybe they eat and do the rest.
Era nga bugamba kati nga abadde abuuza bagifuna bati kagamba nga bwolaba nti ogenze eyo gy'otamanyi era okola eki oliibwe n'ekyo nakyo.
So this is what I was waiting for. And this one relates to us. So he says the other way how they get the meat is through people who are new in the area. Like for example, you're new in an area and you're trying to look for direction, you're asking for direction. So when they notice or when you fall in an area where these cannibals are, of course you want to ask for direction. Hey, could you kindly direct me to this place? So when they realize you're new and you don't know the area very well, so they will always give you wrong directions that point you to the place where you will get caught and you become a victim, and they will gang on you, kill you, and eat you up. So he says there's a scenario in the village. Okay, Bajita Chachirugu? Yeah, Chachirugu. Yeah, that's similar kind of scenario happened where new visitors came. They didn't know the area, so in the process of asking, could you direct us here? They landed in the trap and they just disappeared like that, and they were eaten. Yes.
But there is a worldwide shortage of organs and a surplus of poor people who believe that the solution to their suffering is not to receive an organ. It is one of the great miracles of modern medicine, the saving of a dying patient with a transplanted body part. But there is a worldwide shortage of organs and a surplus of poor people who believe that the solution to their suffering is not to receive an organ, but to sell one.
Oh no. Oh dear.
Boy, a 44-year-old husband and father, yearns to lift his family from abject poverty. He's decided to sell one of his kidneys. His home is a crawl space under someone else's shack. It's too small to stand up in, and there's no electricity.
Ang unang-una kong gagawin, kaya ko inisisyonan ng labag sa batas at labag sa Panginoon ang gagawin ko. Itong bahay ko kailangan mabago man lang to. Ito lang, ayan lang ang tagi kong inaano. Para sa, kumbaga, malalaki na yung mga anak ko, binata na yung dalawa kong lalaki. Para naman masilayan din nila yung bahay na maluwag, tulugan at nakakatayo pag nandito sa loob ng bahay. Yun lang kung hinahangat ko sa ano na yun.
In the Philippines, like almost everywhere else on Earth, selling a part of your body is illegal. The result is a flourishing black market run by backstreet brokers like Diane. Like most brokers, Diane sold one of her own kidneys and served as the agent for a dozen members of her extended family when they sold theirs.
Ay si Edwin, si Lorenzo, An, si Lidonio, Judy Leto. Panganay ko si Jose Leto, yan si Yap.
Diane has offered Joe Boy $2,500, double what he'd earned from unskilled labor in a year.
Ngayon, may grupo kami nga nakanda na mag-donate. Anim yan po sila. Type A, Type B, Type O, EB.
All they need now is someone who is desperately ill. Every year, all over the world, thousands of people like Joe Boy make the same decision. 50 years ago, it wasn't possible to take one kidney from another to save a life. Now, it's almost routine. We are born with two. With proper care, we can live and thrive with one. But the demand for this organ far exceeds the supply. So many desperate patients turn to the black market where, in some countries, you can pick up a kidney for the price of a laptop.
Oh.
I was diagnosed at 21 that I had kidney failure. Generally when this happens, it happens when you're older. Of course, you go into denial and you think, no way, this can't be happening to me. I'm just trying to live the life I think I would have lived if this didn't happen.
Mary Jo has been waiting for a kidney transplant for 6 years. She's kept alive on dialysis.
Dialysis, what it does is, it cleans your blood, but it's not just taking out the toxins, it's taking out everything. So anything good that's in your body as well comes out at the same time. So, you're wiped out. When you get off, you're completely wiped out. So it takes its toll. My hand, I'm not fit.
That's okay.
I've got stuff happening all the time. I've got a 3-year-old kid who's got special needs. I've got a husband, I've got a house, I've got a career. If I want to do the things I've always wanted to do, I still want to travel, I want to live my life. So this is for anybody. It took me, I'd say, at least a good year to really get used to sticking sharp needles in my arm. And you have to do dialysis every other day. It just changes you. It changes the way you look at things. It changes your way of life, your perspective on things, and how you would do things normally. That's what hurts. You can't stay on this machine forever. It doesn't do what a kidney does. I think, God, how much longer am I going to have to do this? I would love to have a living donor, if that was possible. This is it, unless somebody offers me a kidney or unless a cadaver becomes available. This is what keeps me alive.
There's no point in having a bad attitude. You put up with what you have to put up with, and there's no point in complaining about it. It's a matter of just what you have to deal with. I'm effectively between a rock and a hard place. If I can get a transplant in the next year or two, I will probably live another 20, 25 years. If I, don't manage to maintain my health long enough to get a transplant, and they take me off the transplant list, I'll be dead in 8 years, probably. It's not living. It's existing.
So, Walter, how long have you been on the transplant list already?
Almost 2 years.
Wow.
What do I have? Probably 2 or 3 years before I probably had problems.
Currently, people that were put on the transplant list at the time you were, they're waiting anywhere from 4 to 5 years for a kidney to become available unless they have a living donor.
Right.
Sunset comes, dates, fruit, warm bread at our fingertips, but for so many, Maghrib brings only empty hands.
Darkness falls in Delhi. The cool of the evening offers a chance to cruise the streets for old and young. But hiding in the shadows, Surindir Kohli, a man whose mind is full of the images of children. Children that he had slaughtered.
This was a man who came from one world and left for another. And if that wasn't difficult enough, he found that the world he entered was full of depravity.
As they had ventured onto the streets, the unsuspecting were wide-eyed with excitement, oblivious to the threat posed by Surindir Kohli.
He'd lure the children back to the bungalow with sweets, with toffees, with offers of chocolate.
Over 2 years, 19 were to disappear. Kohli went unsuspected as parents accused police of indifference to their plight.
This is every parent's worst nightmare. Your child goes missing. You don't know where they are, but worse than that, it seems that no one's listening.
Did one of India's worst serial killers stand out from the crowd? Anything but. Even when confessing, his voice calm, unemotional, normal. Could anyone get inside the mind of a serial killer? Two girls went missing from an area of Delhi. The neighborhood, originally a village called Mithari, is one where poorer people do what they can to make ends meet. Some, like the Lal family, serve the growing numbers of middle-class professionals by taking in their laundry. One of the jobs given to Jyoti Lal, the family's oldest daughter, was to deliver the freshly cleaned and pressed linen to customers. One day, she became yet another to simply disappear.
तो मैं कहा अभी पकड़ के साथ ही ले जाएगा कोई तो कहीं से कोई मिल ही जाएगा लेकिन वो पकड़ के क्या लगा तो पकड़ के कोठी में मार दिया तो कहाँ पता लगेगा बाहर में.
From a parent's perspective, it's a moment not just of utter panic, but of huge vulnerability. What do? Your child's gone missing. You can't find it. People aren't really taking heed. So how impotent, how frantically worried, how guilty must you feel?
Had she become the latest victim of Surindir Kohli, a man who began life in a tiny, remote village? There, he learned how to butcher.
He used to help his father. He used to skin them, cut the parts of the body of the animal, and then he will remove the flesh from the bones and they sell that.
One day, hundreds of miles away in a giant suburb called Noida, he would use those skills to dissect the bodies of children.
There wasn't one victim. There were many. Every second parent, not only in that sector, from whole of Noida.
What makes Surindir Kohli even more horrifying? He was a cannibal, eating the organs of some of his victims. The trigger?
Kohli was seeing highly sexualized behavior, probably for the first time in his rather sheltered life.
Surrounded by sex, he was unable to do anything about it. With older women, he was impotent.
He had a sexual deviancy that made him perhaps unable to perform with women his own age.
Nobody knew of the turmoil developing in the mind of Surindir Kohli, who, by 2005, was killing at a rate of one child a month. Kohli selected victims at random. He showed no emotion, no mercy, as he cut up their bodies.
It was a gruesome murder. It was the brutal murder that ever I heard about it. It was worse than any other incident that I covered.
As the grotesque series of murders came to light, the questions. What had shaped the mind of a man who killed 19 times in just 2 years? Kohli was moulded in two very different worlds, new and old India, urban and rural.
This is somebody who's grown up in the foothills of the Himalayas, a very, very different place to where he is now in the middle of Delhi. Different in terms of how people speak to each other, what they expect of each other, different in terms of the sights, the smells, the cultural norms, the social norms.
It's a hard world if you're poor, and most people are. Just getting through the day is quite a challenge.
So this is somebody who is, for all intents and purposes, trying to take on a new persona, trying to find his way in this new part of the world.
Culturally, northern India couldn't be more different to the urban areas. Wander out of your village, you could be eaten by tigers, leopards. There was no internet, there was no TV. Suddenly this boy was thrown into the dazzle of Delhi.
A key ingredient in the events which are to follow Kohli's move to the city is social class.
He comes from a social caste in India called the Untouchables. Now, very sadly, this is seen as a social group that is so below everybody else, that they're apart from the norm, that they shouldn't be interacted with, that they should do the most menial jobs, the jobs that no one wants to do. And this is a young man that clearly is trying to shake that off somehow. This is something that he's aware of, but clearly isn't happy with. He wants to move forward. He wants to do things that other people do.
Serial killers seldom stick out in the crowd. But go back to Kohli's childhood and some unsettling signs do appear.
The person is introverted, not very good in studies, and is not very sociable, have very limited social interactions, limited financial resources, limited experiences, and he did not have lots of warmth because he was not close to his family. He didn't have many friends at all.
An introvert with few friends. Hardly enough to explain what made Surendra Kohli a serial killer. It was what happened next which tells more about the shaping of his mind. When he reached 13, Surendra left for the urban sophistication of one of the world's fastest growing economies. Delhi, a 450-kilometre train ride away. It was some culture shock. In the city, Kohli eventually got a job as a servant in bungalow D5 in the rapidly modernising Noida.
He was staying alone as a domestic help in this particular household, and his family was away in the village.
He would cook, clean and do odd jobs for Monandir Panda Singh, a well-travelled businessman, a man who would introduce his young assistant to a very different world from the one he was used to, a world of networking, parties, a very adult world. Two very different men, Kohli, the poor boy from the sticks, and his very worldly boss.
Panda was a player. He liked to be connected with the business elite, the political elite of the city. He held parties, and he liked to bring girls back for sex.
Oh.
So the country boy was not just encountering the pace and explosion of activity in the big city, he was encountering some of the truly dreadful things that take place there as well.
Panda, the sophisticated businessman with the big house, Kohli's de facto life mentor, was setting a very bad example.
Because his employer is seen as someone of a higher caste, as someone of more means, as someone of more respect, it's perhaps even making it something to look up to, something admirable.
So the developing picture of Surendra Kohli had taken a sordid and significant turn for the worse. The once naive country boy would welcome prostitutes into the home of his rich boss. At the same time, a macabre number count of missing children had begun. 2 had disappeared, and now Jyoti, the laundryman's daughter, was missing. Before he struck again, could anyone uncover what was going on inside the mind of a serial killer?
Filming from the feet slowly up to the head. And you go, sit, pan. Bloody hell, don't you ever watch movies? You must see thousands of movies. You must know what it's like. The training. Chimpanzees that can't operate a camera. Anybody can do it.
These are the home movies of a murderer.
Can you go back a bit? I mean, you're far too near.
A man who in the 1980s would be uncovered as the most prolific serial killer in British history.
And you ain't seen nothing yet.
A civil servant whose extraordinary behaviour would see him named with cruel irony, the kindly killer.
Batteries had run out. That's why the camera went up the creek. Okay, fair enough. You think you know how to use that? All you do is point it down and press a button.
But was this murderer of young men driven by nature or nurture? Was the kindly killer born to kill?
Cut.
And serves 2 hungry people. Domino's Collection Perfection.
Had died at sea, and his corpse had been brought home for burial.
He had this picture in his mind imprinted of seeing his grandfather white as a sheet, and I think that affected him deeply.
Nielsen would later say that when he saw his grandfather laid out in the front sitting room after his grandfather's death, that this was when Nielsen first began to associate love with death, an inert body.
From that moment, I'm convinced, I can't prove it, but I'm convinced that his idea of love and his idea of death fused and became linked, inextricably linked. When his mother said to him, "Your granddad's gone to a better place," he, the little boy, aged 6, thought, well, if he's gone to a better place, why didn't he take me with him? He would sometimes even go out into the sea and simulate drowning as a means of being with him.
Aged 15, Nielsen would leave his home behind.
Nielsen would join the army. Specifically, he joined the catering corps, which is, of course, where he'd learned his butchering skills that were going to be put to use in a different context when he's back in civilian life.
In 1983, the discovery of human flesh blocking the drains at 23 Cranley Gardens had led to the arrest of civil servant Dennis Nielsen. He claimed to have taken the lives of at least 15 young men. Investigators learned that he'd had a lonely childhood, punctuated by the death of a beloved grandfather. At 15 years old, he joined the Army Catering Corps. Early on, the young Nielsen would stand out from his fellow new recruits.
He was quite argumentative in as much as not picking an argument in a nasty sort of way, but if you said that photograph is black and white, you'd know he was saying it was white and black, and so forth. He was quite contrary as a person, really. We used to sit listening to the Beatles, Rolling Stones. We'd read the Parade magazines, which are like girly magazines of their day, and he'd probably be reading broadsheets, and he'd also listen to classical music. I remember there was once a scrap in the barrack room, and I think he scratched and slapped. He didn't thump like the rest of us. I remember somebody saying, "Oh, Nielsen, you're weird."
The teenage Nielsen harboured a secret.
What's interesting about the army experience is that it would have been impossible for Nielsen to have shared the fact that he was gay with any of his colleagues.
Basically, they just didn't accept homosexuals at all. So if somebody was gay, they'd keep very, very quiet about it.
During his time in the army, Nielsen began a lifelong interest in photography.
He maintained it was his hobby, photography, but it was much more important than a hobby. It was self-realization. He used to get his colleagues in the army to pretend that they were corpses, as if they'd been slain in battle, and he would take photographs of that. They thought this was a bit odd, but they went along with it.
Nielsen would spend 11 years in the Armed Forces Catering Corps, rising to the rank of corporal.
I think he was a bit of a bully underneath, but with his rank, you know, once he was in charge of a room sort of thing, I think he tended to bully a bit.
He had lost 13 pounds in 3 weeks, so I knew.
Just before his 27th birthday, Nielsen would reject the familiarity and order of army life and strike out on his own. In 1970s London, he found a thriving gay scene.
He's living in a large urban metropolitan area where clearly there are gay pubs that he would be able to visit for the first time.
People were more friendlier back then. People were very chatty, and life in London was exciting at that time. He wasn't a bad-looking man, and he seemed quite educated, quite good to talk to.
He chooses his words well, fluently, but after a few minutes you'd realise that he's not talking to you or with you, but he's talking to himself, because he doesn't pay attention to anything except what he himself is saying.
What are you doing switching the bloody thing on and off for? You never make a cameraman, you know. No. I'm not going to do anything pornographic.
Nielsen joined the Metropolitan Police.
This is not unusual for these individuals to seek out a profession of authority, whether it's a police officer or some other civil servant type job where they could have control over someone else. This is what is so stimulating to them.
He's living a double life. He's living a life of the police constable, but at the same time, he's also living a double life, talking about being able to express his sexuality. And of course, that inevitably would lead to conflict.
After 11 months, Nielsen tired of the police and quit. He was also becoming disillusioned with the transient nature of the gay scene and began to seek more permanent companionship.
What he was looking for was a relationship, somebody to share his life with.
You didn't go out to find companionship in a club. You just went out to pick up. That was what generally people did. They weren't there for an affair or a relationship. They just wanted a one-night stand.
He got a job with Manpower Services in the heart of the West End. But the opinionated young Scot struggled to bond with anyone.
He's not somebody who's going to make friends very easily. He's not somebody who's going to be the life and soul of the party. He's far too self-centered. He's far too self-obsessed.
Harassed commuter, harassed London tenant being screwed by the Department of Employment, London Transport, big chain stores, supermarkets. Can you, right, cut there, let me think.
So he's got this quite isolated existence in which he finds it difficult to make friends, in which it's very difficult for him to socialize in any normal way, and that isolation would mean that he would return to his home and lose himself in alcohol. He was a drunk, frankly. I'm not sure he was alcoholic, but he did like to get drunk.
Beer I cannot stand, I got it for free at the bottle party. No.
And he would listen intently to music.
Nielsen was more at ease with machines and objects than he was with people. So music was a way of controlling what was being heard. You can't control a person, you can't control what he's going to say and how he's going to react and how he's going to respond, but you can control the record player.
Here's to you, Mrs. Robinson.
In 1976, Nielsen meets a young drifter called David Gallishan. Gallishan is unemployed and living in a hostel. And although they're seemingly unsuited,
Nielsen seeks out a flat for them both to set up home together.
Yeah, okay, come on a minute. I gotta sign on. Oh yeah, I'm gonna sign on today. I'll sign on again. Where's that bloody dog? It's been chewing my slippers again. Here it is. Chewing your slippers, I give it. I'll wring its bloody neck if I catch it again.
Melrose Avenue was a very old kind of building. It had lots of furniture in it that lots of had been bought during the war, really. It was quite old. The carpets weren't very nice, and it was quite a run-down building.
1:10 last night. Son asleep, Twink over there, me here. What happens? Crash, bang, what? Have a look, move the camera up there. Have a look at that. Right? Look at the state of that. Whole bloody ceiling falls down. Falls down on me for a start. Rips straight across, hits the dog, poor old push, budgie goes up. Big row. That wakes you up as well. Great chunks. Bloody great chunks of masonry. I mean, you could kill somebody. Listen to that.
They had French windows which led into a garden. Nobody from upstairs could get into the garden. Only he had the entrance through the French windows.
You're a big nincompoop. Oi, over here. Over here. Over here. Stand up. How long do you think it'd take me to dig the garden? Don't stand there with your hand on your hip like a big poof.
But Nielsen's overpowering and controlling nature would drive a wedge between the companions.
Find everything. Oh, come on, where's my bloody tea then? Well, tea? Well, it is.
David Galashan walked out on him after about 18 months. And that really hurt Nielsen, I'm sure it did.
He was essentially a lonely man by virtue of the fact that he bored everyone and they all left him.
So the thing he's searching for is companionship, a relationship, and it's the one thing that psychologically, sociologically, he's not set up to be able to do.
You're a great pillock, Twinkle.
By Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war.
World War II is known for its brutalities, but one of the darkest and least discussed horrors was the shocking cannibalism and immense torment by Japanese soldiers. Imagine being stranded on a remote island, where hunger and desperation pushed soldiers to unimaginable extremes, not just for survival, but sometimes as an act of pure dominance. These horrifying acts, often targeting prisoners and even their own fallen comrades, became a chilling chapter of the war. As the Allied forces closed in, the madness escalated to a level that, in some cases, outdid the Nazis. Let's uncover this gruesome and haunting side of World War II. Number 13, cannibalism, a horrific war crime. Japanese forces in the Pacific theater of World War II perpetrated unspeakable atrocities that exceeded the standard brutality of warfare. As Allied forces advanced and resources dwindled, some Japanese soldiers resorted to cannibalism out of desperation. However, in many cases, this gruesome practice was used as a tool of terror and control rather than mere survival. Reports emerged of Japanese commanders ordering the consumption of enemy soldiers and local civilians. One chilling account describes the fate of 8 American pilots who were captured after bailing out over Chichijima. Some were killed immediately, while others were kept alive to be eaten later. In particularly horrifying instances, victims were reportedly dismembered while still alive. Though the Japanese government has attempted to downplay or erase this dark chapter of history, verified accounts confirm that cannibalism was employed as a deliberate tactic during the war. These acts of extreme cruelty serve as a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity in times of conflict. Number 12. The Nanjing Massacre, a dark chapter in history. The Nanjing Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking, marks one of the darkest chapters in modern history. Following a brutal victory in Shanghai during the early stages of World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army set its sights on Nanjing, the capital of China. Anticipating significant military losses, Chinese nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek ordered a withdrawal of troops from the city, leaving behind only a small contingent of untrained auxiliary forces. This decision proved catastrophic, as it left civilians vulnerable to the impending horrors that would unfold over the next 6 weeks. On December 1st, 1937, the Chinese government officially abandoned Nanjing, placing it under the control of an international committee tasked with protecting civilians. However, on December 13th, Japanese troops led by General Matsui invaded the city. Driven by a combination of hunger and a desire for revenge for their fallen comrades, these soldiers unleashed a wave of violence that would lead to unimaginable suffering. Families were massacred in their homes, public executions became commonplace, and streets were littered with corpses. Estimates regarding the death toll vary widely. However, it is believed that between 200,000 and 300,000 people lost their lives during this period. Among the most horrific aspects of the massacre was the widespread sexual violence inflicted upon women. Reports indicate that between 20,000 and 80,000 women were raped and murdered in brutal ways. The destruction was extensive. Approximately 1/3 of Nanjing was set ablaze as Japanese forces sought to pillage and annihilate the city. The massacre officially began on December 13th and lasted for 6 weeks. During this time, captured Chinese soldiers were executed en masse in violation of wartime laws. Male civilians were also targeted. Many were falsely accused of being soldiers and summarily killed. The Japanese military employed tactics such as mopping up operations, where any healthy male was presumed to be a soldier and subsequently executed. The international community's response was limited. Despite efforts by foreign nationals living in Nanjing to establish a safety zone to protect civilians, many were not able to escape the violence. These individuals risked their lives to intervene during atrocities and document what they witnessed. Their accounts describe Nanjing during this time as hell on earth, highlighting the extreme brutality exhibited by Japanese troops. The aftermath of the massacre left deep scars on both Nanjing and China as a whole. The chaos created mass graves throughout the city, making precise casualty counts impossible. The Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal later addressed these atrocities, but many perpetrators faced minimal consequences for their actions. The Nanjing Massacre's legacy continues to stir up strong feelings and discussions about historical memory and responsibility. Survivors' testimonies have been preserved through various initiatives aimed at ensuring that these events are not forgotten. The massacre serves as a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for violence and the importance of remembering history to prevent future atrocities.
American Southwest, spadefoot toad tadpoles hatch in tiny oases. Until they develop into toadlets, they can't survive outside of water. But these ponds are transient and quickly evaporate. The tadpoles are in a race against the clock to grow up before their nurseries disappear. So nearly overnight, some of the brood explode in size. They use their jack-o'-lantern teeth and huge jaw muscles to devour their smaller pond mates. Nourished by this extra fuel, they develop quicker, leaving the pond before it can dry out. The spadefoot toad is far from the only animal to eat members of its own species as a normal part of its life cycle. All of these animals do. If that surprises you, you're in good company. Until recently, scientists thought cannibalism was a rare response to starvation or other extreme stress. Well-known cannibals like the praying mantis and black widow spider were considered bizarre exceptions, but now we know they more or less represent the rule. While it may seem counterproductive for members of the same species to eat each other, cannibalism can promote the survival of the species as a whole by reducing competition, culling the weak, and bolstering the strong. Some species, like the spadefoot toad, cannibalize in response to environmental pressures. Their situation is precarious, but cannibalism for them isn't a last-ditch attempt to avoid starvation. Rather, it's a way to more quickly outgrow a stage where they're especially vulnerable to predation or dangerous environmental conditions. Other species, including many fish, indiscriminately cannibalize each other during foraging behavior. Fish produce large numbers of tiny young, and adults exhibit about as much individual recognition of their offspring as humans do for a handful of raisins. Fish eggs, larvae, and juveniles are easily available, nutrient-rich meals, and with thousands of eggs in a clutch, plenty are still available to hatch after the adults have snacked. Baby fish aren't just at risk of being cannibalized by adults. Siblings eat each other too. Sand tiger shark eggs develop and hatch inside their mother's oviducts at different times. When the hatchlings run out of yolk from their own eggs, they eat the other eggs and hatchlings until one baby shark from each oviduct remains. When they emerge, the young sharks are well-nourished, experienced predators who stand a better chance of surviving. Even when they aren't consumed for nutrition, young animals are especially vulnerable to cannibalism. Hamsters, rats, and other rodent mothers will eat some of their young if they're sick, dead, or simply too numerous to feed. In other mammals, including bears and lions, males will kill offspring sired by another. That's because childless females become receptive to mating more quickly than if they were caring for a cub. Rather than waste nutritious meat, the males then eat the dead cubs. Meanwhile, cannibalism is less common in birds than in other groups, but certain species will eat diseased or dead hatchlings as a way of disposing of the bodies before they can attract maggots. When adults eat each other, males are cannibalized more often than females, usually during mating, and generally because they're smaller. Male Australian redback spiders mate with much larger females. Rather than scrambling away after mating, the tiny male does a somersault, bringing his abdomen into contact with his mate's mouth parts. The female showers him with enzyme-rich gut juice and consumes his abdomen. Males not killed in the initial mating crawl back into the fray, often half-eaten, to mate again, after which they're dispatched to the spider pantry. So not only does the male provide the female with his sperm, but he also provides her with a nutritious meal to better ensure that she'll survive to pass on his genes. All in all, it's clear that cannibalism is as much a part of life in the animal kingdom as other, better recognized behaviors. As we sink our teeth into the evidence of cannibalism in nature, we might ask ourselves, what else have we missed by applying human standards to the natural world? 15th century Europeans believed they had hit upon a miracle cure, a remedy for epilepsy, hemorrhage, bruising, nausea, and virtually any other medical ailment. This brown powder could be mixed into drinks, made into salves, or eaten straight up. It was known as mummia, and made by grinding up mummified human flesh. The word cannibal dates from the time of Christopher Columbus. In fact, Columbus may even have coined it himself. After coming ashore on the island of Guadalupe, Columbus's initial reports back to the Queen of Spain described the indigenous people as friendly and peaceful, though he did mention rumors of a group called the Caribs, who made violent raids and then cooked and ate their prisoners. In response, Queen Isabella granted permission to capture and enslave anyone who ate human flesh. When the island failed to produce the gold Columbus was looking for, he began to label anyone who resisted his plundering and kidnapping as a Caribe. Somewhere along the way, the word Carib became Canibe, and then cannibal. First used by colonizers to dehumanize indigenous people, it has since been applied to anyone who eats human flesh. So the term comes from an account that wasn't based on hard evidence, but cannibalism does have a real and much more complex history. It has taken diverse forms. Sometimes, as with mummia, it doesn't involve recognizable parts of the human body. The reasons for cannibalistic practices have varied too. Across cultures and time periods, there's evidence of survival cannibalism, when people living through a famine, siege, or ill-fated expedition had to either eat the bodies of the dead or starve to death themselves. But it's also been quite common for cultures to normalize some form of eating human flesh under ordinary circumstances. Because of false accounts like Columbus's, it's difficult to say exactly how common cultural cannibalism has been. But there are still some examples of accepted cannibalistic practices from within the cultures practicing them. Take the medicinal cannibalism in Europe during Columbus's time. Starting in the 15th century, the demand for mummia increased. At first, stolen mummies from Egypt supplied the mummia craze, but soon the demand was too great to be sustained on Egyptian mummies alone, and opportunists stole bodies from European cemeteries to turn into mummia. Use of mummia continued for hundreds of years. It was listed in the Merck Index, a popular medical encyclopedia, into the 20th century. And ground-up mummies were far from the only remedy made from human flesh that was common throughout Europe. Blood, in either liquid or powdered form, was used to treat epilepsy, while human liver, gallstones, oil distilled from human brains, and pulverized hearts were popular medical concoctions. In China, the written record of socially accepted cannibalism goes back almost 2,000 years. One particularly common form of cannibalism appears to have been filial cannibalism, where adult sons and daughters would offer a piece of their own flesh to their parents. This was typically offered as a last-ditch attempt to cure a sick parent and wasn't fatal to their offspring. It usually involved flesh from the thigh, or less often, a finger. Cannibalistic funerary rites are another form of culturally sanctioned cannibalism. Perhaps the best-known example came from the Foray people of New Guinea. Through the mid-20th century, members of the community would, if possible, make their funerary preferences known in advance, sometimes requesting that family members gather to consume the body after death. Tragically, though these rituals honored the deceased, they also spread a deadly disease known as kuru through the community. Between the fictionalized stories, verifiable practices, and big gaps that still exist in our knowledge, there's no one history of cannibalism. But we do know that people have been eating each other, volunteering themselves to be eaten, and accusing others of eating people for millennia. On